Welcome to the HIT podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As we do every week, we're dropping into your feed on Tuesdays with what I hope are bite-sized, digestible, really well-curated conversations going on in this space. Going out and finding amazing folks with great things to say, good topics, good rabbit holes to dive down. So I appreciate you guys. We see the numbers going up every week. Thank you guys for joining us. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without any further ado, I'm very excited to get into it. Wendi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Toby?
I'm great. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. I know you've got your book coming up right around the corner in the new year. I know you've got sort of lots that we want to dive into. We've had a couple amazing phone calls getting ready for this podcast. But just to maybe back up, can you tell the listener a little bit about you?
Oh, absolutely. So my day job is I'm a professor at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. And I teach a lot of mindset development framed around writing and communications, actually, because there's a lot of misguided mindsets around professional communication. And so that is what I do for my job, my community. And then I'm also a mom. I have a beautiful, almost 10-year-old daughter.
Oh,
And
how sweet.
thank you. And so I'm just so honored to be here and spend
Yeah.
some time with you and your audience today. It's going to be great.
Great. Yeah, I've got my 8-year-old boy and 5-year-old girl myself.
Nice.
And yeah, I appreciate diving into that. So you talk a little bit about mindset, a little bit about kind of professional mindset, communication. And I think that you've got some really fascinating kind of takes on that. So do you mind just sort of diving into sort of some of your findings, some of the things you talk about, some of the stuff you find interesting?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So actually, to kind of backtrack a little bit, I've been teaching on mindset for over a decade because I found more and more. I started out as an elementary school teacher
Mm.
many, many years ago before I moved into higher ed. And additionally, I do work with faculty. I do faculty development. And what I found was so much of the content I taught was much more effective and much more developed on a deeper level when I helped my students, regardless of age,
Mm.
develop their mindset and
Mm.
really start thinking about their belief in themselves. Because if you believe you can do it, right, it opens up an entire different conversation, whether
Yeah.
you want to do it or not.
Yeah.
And so this is my 22nd year to teach in various capacities. And so I have just spent a lot of time digging into how do we help people develop their mindset. And it took me, the funny thing is I've been doing this with students and clients for years. And it took me until a couple of years ago to really start digging into it myself. And so
Mm.
my research comes from not only research I do with my students, research that I do as a faculty member, because I research on mindset development as well, as a professor at A&M, but then I also have started doing research on myself because what better test subject do you have, right, than
Yeah.
the person
Yeah.
you are every day?
Yeah, it's good. It's very affordable. You can get a hold of the guy pretty easy. So when you talk about mindsets, I'll tell you initially what comes to my head is needing to learn or absorb knowledge. But I'm curious if you're talking about mindset with respect to approaching, procuring and acquiring new knowledge, or just going about your daily tasks, or kind of talk to me about what you mean by that.
Absolutely. Great question. So I'm actually talking about both
Mhm.
because I think we've often framed mindset in the context of either education or our professional goals, right? Goals and developments and obtaining those goals. But when we don't also bring that mindset component into our day-to-day life, our just who we are when no one's watching, who we are when we're not on show or we're not trying to prove ourselves, that's where mindset really, I feel, comes into play. Because when we're not putting on a show for everybody else, that's when we get in our own heads. And that's when we allow ourselves to be more vulnerable most often. Some people are really good at being vulnerable in public, but most of us are not. And so
Yeah.
that's where we allow
I
ourselves.
run a podcast where I look like a dummy every week, so we're good. Yeah.
You are great at the vulnerability. No.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thanks.
So
Your words, not mine. Are you listening, Brianna? No, I'm just kidding.
well, you hide it very well. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
So
sweetie. Thank you.
it's a full holistic development, but we often don't teach it in that framework. We do tell ourselves, be kind to yourself,
Right.
make sure that you speak nice to yourself,
Yeah.
make sure that you realize it's okay to fail, all of those things that we've started to say as commonplace, right? As normal nomenclature. But at the end of the day, doing it and believing it are two completely different things. Because part of my study on myself is I looked like I had it all together. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a people pleaser
Mm-hmm.
by birth, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
I always looked like I had it all together. And that became my identity, the identity
Mm-hmm.
that I associated with myself. And so my mindset was shaped around, well, if you don't have it all together, you definitely don't let anyone know,
Mm-hmm.
because then they're going to judge me or criticize me, or I will not look on the outside the way that I want to be perceived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the conversation that we need to be addressing differently, is that holistic approach. If you work on your personal, then the professional aspects of it just become a natural extension of the mindset that you need to have to be the success that you want to be.
And so if you're an HR practitioner listening to this, is your recommendation that we can shift this maybe in like managers trainings and try to permeate that through the organization, or like how can this translate to the employer's landscape?
Very good question. I think there's multiple levels. So starting with working on yourself, because there's no better model than who we are. So regardless of what layer or what level we're at as managers, when you start working on yourself, and again, that vulnerability word is going to keep coming up, right? And
Yeah.
then you can be vulnerable with the process, then the people that you have working with you and working for you see that not only are you trying to help them, it's a process that you're working on yourself. It's not just this, well, I'm going to put a band-aid to try to fix all of these pieces. Because I feel we're
Yeah.
often doing that because we know we need to help people with their mindset. So what are we going to do? What's the easy checkboxy thing that I can use to move forward? But as managers, this is not a one-stop shop. Everyone you're working with is very unique and
Yeah.
very individualized. And so spending time to get to know people, helping managers understand good questions to ask, good ways to reach out to their people and be supportive. And then a bigger piece of it that I think we also need to start integrating throughout the work culture is also celebrating success.
Mm.
We so often move from like, oh, well, even when it's huge successes, well,
Yeah.
we achieved that success, we did so great, now we're moving on to the next. And we don't take time to pause and really reflect on what went well, what would we do different,
Mm-hmm.
and let's celebrate not only the huge successes, but also the little milestones along the way. And to me, it all boils down to culture, helping managers create a culture
Mm-hmm.
of not just acceptance, but of, like I said, celebration and getting to know your people and helping your people understand that you are there to support them.
Is there a danger of getting a little like rah-rah-y or woo-woo-y? Like, when we celebrate these things, I'm curious if you have thoughts between celebrations at the natural conclusion, to your point, of a major project. So I don't know, we're putting on the Oscars, for lack of a better word. It's the day after, and we did a lot of work. We had the big event and it happens, right? So the natural milestones of the conclusion of whatever the project might have been, and also perhaps the natural on-ramps that the calendar gives us. So maybe quarterly, annually, whatever that is, and sort of you kind of your thoughts on a cadence and a size of celebration.
Yes, and that's a very good point, because we are all very capable of recognizing falsehood and like when people are not being genuine, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a massive misnomer around what celebrations need to look like. Yes, if you're putting on the Oscars the next day, hopefully you give your people a day off. But if
Yeah, yeah,
not,
yeah, yeah. Next morning, 8 a.m., I want them all here for a free cup of coffee. Am I
right,
right?
I'm going to have balloons in the background. It's going to be great. But there, it really should be, the celebration should match what happened. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. The size and scope of the
yes.
accomplishment. Yeah, yeah.
And so that's, I think, where we fall into kind of a slump, because we know to celebrate the big things. We know to do, oh, let's have August birthdays, right? And bring in a cake and do the thing. And oh, let's have a massive celebration when we achieve whatever this huge goal that our organization set out to achieve. And all of
Yeah.
that matters. But you can't do that all the time. And if you did it all the time, obviously it would lose its novelty and everyone would be like, oh, look, we're doing, like, it's Cake
Yeah,
Tuesday or
mandatory
whatever.
fun is the joke, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so often I think we need to reframe what we mean by celebration.
Hmm.
Because for many of us, especially if you're someone who's introverted or doesn't like a lot of
Yes.
attention, big celebrations are not going to make you feel valued. They're not going to make you feel appreciated or supported.
Yeah.
Where popping in my office and saying, hey, I saw what you did today in that meeting. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or I noticed that your team was struggling and you overcame that. Well done. It can be an email. Better if it can be a quick face-to-face conversation, not awkward, not uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and most importantly, very sincere,
Yeah.
very sincere.
Yeah.
And I think often we feel like we need to have the right wording or we need to have the right time. And mostly people just want to be seen.
Hmm.
They want to be seen. They want to be recognized for the things they do. The big celebrations are often expected and
Hmm.
understood. It's the little pieces along the way. And that's what can make a massive difference in someone's mindset of, look, somebody saw me, they heard me,
Hmm.
they recognize the work that I'm doing. And when you look at the research on like job retention, so often that's what employees say. I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to know that my work is valued, not just like, oh, well, good job, you did your job and now we're moving on. And
Yeah,
so
to
they
quote Don Draper, right? That's what the money's for, right? Yeah, no, exactly.
exactly,
So, but
exactly.
underlying this, I'm glad you touched on the job retention piece because that's kind of what underpins sort of why we're even talking about this from an HR lens. And I'd be curious to ask you your thoughts on good managers or just managers in general. How incumbent upon the deliverer is it to be cognizant of the recipient's kind of listening language, right? So you mentioned
Yes.
introverts maybe don't want this big whoop whoop. In fact, it might even be detrimental. Like, talk to me about the getting that part right, where it's like, look, I tried, I did I stopped by the office, I tried to high five them, versus how much more success you can have and find if you can speak at a frequency at which the listener really hones in.
Yes. And and part of that is just getting to know your people. And that's easier said than done, obviously. And it depends on the culture. I've worked with clients who, after having a conversation, because you don't want it to be like all of a sudden we start shifting everything. And now we're doing all these weird celebrations and nobody understands why we're doing them. And it feels weird and uncomfortable and all of those pieces, right? And so obviously we don't want that to happen. But if there has to be a conversation of, I need to help people feel valued and I need to explain to them why we're changing this culture, right? Then that's important. But then the other side of it is, again, knowing who you are and knowing what works for you. I worked with a client a couple of years ago, and he's like, I'm not that person. I can't be that person. I have tried to be that person, and it never comes across as valuable. So, what we did for him is we found someone that could be that person
Yeah, yeah,
because some of us are just more in tune, right? And it's
yeah.
easier. And if it's coming from the very, very top, maybe it's not a work culture where that's where the celebration is going to be accepted
Hmm.
and appreciated. But if it's somebody that's maybe a step down or someone who's more in the day to day
Hmm.
with the people, then that can be your person. It depends on your personality and knowing if you feel like it's forced, then your employees are going to feel like it's forced.
Hmm.
And then it's almost a waste of energy and it can
Hmm.
be more detrimental
Hmm.
than it actually is a positive aspect. And so if you know you and that's not one of your strengths, find someone who is, or find someone that can help you. Look around the people that you are engaging with and say, okay, who are those people that seem to be more people integrated or seem to be more cognizant of the people around them?
Right.
And when you do that, you'll realize you already have people you're working with that have those strengths. So don't feel as a manager that you have to take everything on yourself. You don't.
Right.
You can have plenty of people, the same way that you hire good people around you to take care of other aspects of your business.
Hmm.
You can find those people that can help work on the mental well-being side of it as well.
And to be honest with you, from a like horses for courses standpoint, I've actually almost found that finding and identifying those folks that really do a good job of that, do it really genuinely, not only helps to permeate the culture outbound, but they actually like it, right? And so it's like, hey, I've deputized you to be one of the people in this department to where when I notice something, I say something to you and you figure out the right celebration, right? And so then now you're, Susie in this department, and you get to come and say, hey, I was just talking to Toby. We heard about the Johnson success, and boy, he's real excited. And then she could take it from there, whether it's a party or it's, we're all going out for a quick cup of coffee, guys, or let's do a walk around the, whatever, because I'm not necessarily always that guy, but and because I'm not that guy and recognize that, I agree with your comment where when you deputize the right person to do that, it goes better not only to permeate the message, you are genuinely trying to permeate. You're not great at doing it, but you really want it out there. And the little kind of, surrogates you put out there really enjoy doing that too.
They do. And then inadvertently, now like Susie feels good about herself.
Right.
Look, Toby saw in me that this is something, it's not my normal job, right? It's not what I get paid for, but it's something that I find a lot of joy in. And so you almost get a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
I am empowering Susie
Yeah.
to go help others feel good because it's an area that I'm not as strong in. And so the impact that can have with minimal effort, really it's minimal effort once you get kind of in the habit of it. It may take a minute, right? It may take time for you to establish all the different systems around it, if you even want to call that. But
right.
The value is almost immeasurable.
Yeah. So I feel like driving us down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm not even sure if this is some of the stuff you talk about in your book or if we've hit on everything that's big from your book. But, I know you, as you mentioned earlier, you teach on this stuff. You have for a long time at great prestigious universities and have put a lot of time and research into some key thoughts. Are there any of those sort of key thoughts that we haven't really fleshed out yet?
So there's a few. My book is actually a combination of what I teach my students, what I teach my clients, and then through my own life, when I found times where I was not as strong as I thought I would be. I thought that I would come across as this true force of nature, which is where the title of the book comes from. And when I was in the situation and actually had to handle whatever was coming my way, I was horrible at it. Like you talk about failure, I was absolutely horrible at it. And so I thought, like, why in some situations am I a rock star when it comes to believing in myself and standing up for myself and advocating for myself? And in other situations, it's like I have completely forgotten how to do that. And so that is where my book came from. The premise behind my book came from, because I realized the more and more I interact with people, we all want to be able to stand up in those moments when we need to. Now, all the time, absolutely not. I don't want to have to be this like amazing Wonder Woman force of nature every time I walk into a room, right? But I want to have the capacity to if I need to. And so that's the premise behind the book, because as I started doing research, I realized that that force, which I define as the power we have inside ourselves to believe in who we are and what we want to achieve, that force actually comes from 4 places. And so the first is your mindset, which we've been talking about. The second is your identity. So how you see your own identity and then how you want other people to see you, because that's a big piece of it, especially if you think about in management positions, how you want to be seen by your employers, how you want to be perceived. There's a lot that is encompassed just in that one term. The third piece is your habits. So the habits that you have built or need to build to achieve the mindset and the identity that you want. And then the fourth component is your energy. So how you are refilling yourself, but then also the energy that you expend to others. And what I have found is when all 4 of those components are strong and you've really thought about them, that's when you can really believe in yourself. And some of us have all 4 areas where we need to work. And some of us are like, you know what? My identity is strong. I got that. My habits are awesome. I have a good morning routine. I have things that I do along the way to make my life better, but I need to work on my mindset and I need to work on the energy that I take in and the energy that I give out. And so my book is set up in a way that I joke that it's a choose your own adventure book. If you're a child of the 90s like me, where if you want to read it from start to finish, I hope you do. I will definitely not stop you, but our lives are busy, right? And so in my typical teaching nature, because I can't help it, the book is set up where it can be more choose your own adventure. So if you're like, you know what, I really want some strategies to help me develop my identity, to really reflect on how I want to be seen and better how I see myself, then you can flip to the identity section, work through an assessment to help you develop the identity that you want. And then there's a bunch of resources to use that are simple, easy to implement, things that we can easily incorporate into our lives because we're all busy. And there's not going to be a massive shift. And tomorrow I'm a completely different person than I am today, right? But we're also all very unique. So there's no one stop process, no one size fits all approach to really developing a belief that we have in ourselves. And so that is how the book is laid out. And again, it's based on my own life experiences, but then research that I've done throughout the years. And it's been such a fantastic journey.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to be able to share it and for the book to release very, very soon.
Yeah, I'm super grateful for that. And maybe just to kind of bring us home, do you have any good, can you tease us with a good idea on whether it's identity habits, whether it's energy, kind of whatever it might be? What's something you're like, this is in the book and I like this one.
So one of my favorites is alter ego. If you've ever heard of having an alter ego. And the idea behind an alter ego is it's actually, Beyonce made it famous. It's not my idea, but Beyonce has an alter ego named Sasha Fierce. And she doesn't use her as much as she used to. But the idea is when you're in a situation where you need to be your strongest self, but for whatever reason you can't be, then you rely on the confidence of someone else. And it could be someone made up, like Beyonce's character, or it could be someone in your life where you're like, you know what? Today, I want to show up like this awesome mentor that I've had for years, or I want to show up like the person that my daughter wants me to be, or I want to show up as someone who is seen in this context. Because when you reframe your mindset around that, then it's like, okay, I can channel the energy of someone else. I can channel the confidence of someone else. And when I do that, it's amazing how my mindset shifts. So that's one of my favorites.
I love that. There's that meme that says just be the human your dog thinks you are or whatever.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
But no, it's funny. Here's this, and this is the difference between a professor from Texas that and a lame sports guy from LA. You're talking about Sasha Fierce, and when you talked about alter egos, I'm like, I know, like Kobe with Black Mamba. Like when he got into playoff mode, he got into Mamba mode and Mamba mentality. But it is that thing, and it's not new, as you said. I mean, Marcus Aurelius wrote about, in his meditations, trying to even invent a mentor or think of a mentor, but try to live this moment as if that mentor is watching, or that mentor is being channeled, or that mentor is kind of here with you, and you can try to embody that. And I love, I constantly say this on the podcast, that I think some of the best ideas, they borrow from stuff that's been around for thousands of years, because the reason it's been around for thousands of years is that it works, right?
Yes.
So,
and if you look at the most successful people, this is what they do. We have been talking about mindset for years. We've been talking about identity for years. We've been talking about habits for years. Like none of these are new concepts. But we look at people like Kobe Bryant and we think, well, I'm not Kobe. Well, no, you're not.
Yeah.
But if he needs it, so do you.
Right.
Another one that I love is just taking a minute to slow down. There's a piece where I'm in the energy chapter where it's allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission to just slow down for a hot second. And like literally, if you need to physically put your hand on your heart and just breathe for a minute, like it's okay if you train yourself to slow down and recognize what you're spending your energy on and stop just spinning your wheels and spinning your wheels and spinning your wheels. And so there's a section in that chapter on just being reflective of where your energy is going.
Yeah.
And is that where you want your energy to go?
Yeah.
And we don't always have complete control over that, right? But
no,
if most of your day is stressful and you're running around like a crazy person, and it's like, in the book, I give you strategies for stopping for a second and thinking about how do I align my energy with what I actually want? And then how do I get more energy? If I need more energy, where do I get that from? Because
there's
energy is not
the book
on
the F's that people have to give, and you'll have so many F's to give, and where are you giving those F's, and kind of saying like, hey, do I need to reevaluate where I'm sending? We'll change it to your word energy because it's more appropriate for this podcast, but all the places I'm devoting my energy, and has that been reevaluated recently? Does it need to be redeployed? And do certain spots need to be dialed down and perhaps others dialed up?
Yes. Because even good things, right? I call it with my students, I say manage your shiny objects, because I may love the 10 things that are in front of me and they all look really fun and they all look really good, but I can't handle 10 things. I don't have the capacity for 10 things. So
Yeah.
they may be great things, but you still need to, like I say, manage your shiny objects. Be mindful of where your energy's going.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful way to end this podcast. And I hope everyone grabs a copy of the book and pings you and finds you on LinkedIn. We'll add a lower third for you here in post so people know how to contact you. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming out and giving of your time and, decades of wisdom and sharing with our listeners. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the podcast. The work you do, Toby, is amazing.
I
So
appreciate that.
you're changing the business world, and I love that you're starting to have a conversation also around, well, the mindset, mental side of it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the day-to-day tasks are important and the ways to be more effective and efficient are important, but believing in yourself is a part of that conversation. And so, well done.
Well,
Toby,
see,
that's
my problem
fantastic.
is normally what I do is I grab like 60 to 75 seconds of what we talked about as a teaser for the episode. But I'm just going to grab this clip if you give me a huge compliment. And so if people want to know what we're talking about, now you just have to watch the episode.
Perfect. I think that'd be great.
Thank you so much for joining us, Wendi. I appreciate it deeply. And thank you guys for watching. That's all the time we have this week. Join us next week. Join us every week. Thank you to our sponsors, True Heat. Thank you guys for watching. And until next week, make this the best week yet.